There, I had remembered that they said, they wanted to do a memorial service at the end of this coming week, maybe on a Sunday night. And I thought, oh, you know what? Monica, I need to tell you, I want to do everything we can to minister to you and your family, but I have to tell you, this is a vacation Bible school week, and the whole place has been decked out, in the theme of VBS. And I said it would be really strange to hold a memorial service for your husband in this kind of setting. We transform this place once a year for little kids, and I described it. And in a moment of time, we both looked at the window of the sanctuary and realized what the theme of VBS was. And if you look behind me, you'll notice the theme is aviation. And I said to Monica, do you believe in God moments? I said, we've never had this theme before. Can you imagine all the dots that needed to come together for this moment of time? And she says, we need to have this service here. And I said, yes, we do. And so next Sunday night in the evening, with still all this decorated, for a man named Carl Johan Nurmi, we'll have a memorial service. So this morning I went to Brenda and I said, Brenda, I'd really love to share this story with the congregation, but I haven't really passed it by Monica yet. But it's just so touching. But I don't know if I should. And so, as Pastor Michael often is, I was running late. And so, something else happened. And finally I get out the door and I pull up to the light right here. And I'm thinking, should I, shouldn't I? And so I come up to the light. And who do I see crossing the street walking her dog? This morning, like a half hour ago. Monica. And I thought, Lord, I think this is another sign. So I pulled my car over and I said, Monica, I was just thinking about you and I just wanted to ask you, could I share your story? Because it's just such, the fingerprints of God are all over it. She said, oh yes, please do share it. God seeks the lost. And sometimes when we wonder, are you there, Lord? And in a time like this in her life, reeling, wondering, what's happened? Is there a God on the throne somewhere who actually cares about me?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. He's a God of incredible majesty and detail. And He has come to seek lost sheep. And in this particular chapter, you will see in Luke 15, there's 3 parables that are actually a panel of parables. 3 panels, really the same idea behind it. You will see a parable of a lost sheep, a parable of a lost coin, and a parable of a lost son. And in all 3 instances, they're really about a God who seeks the lost. Would you read it with me? Luke 15, verse 1. Now all the tax gatherers and the sinners were coming near him, notice, to listen to him. At the end of the radical message on discipleship, when Jesus closed that message in Luke 14:34, he said, therefore salt is good, but if even salt has become tasteless, Luke 14:34, with what will it be seasoned? It is useless either for the soil or for the manure pile. It is thrown out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Remember, chapter breaks are not in the original gospel. Now all the tax gatherers and the sinners were coming near to what? Near him to listen to him. They pressed in, even after a difficult teaching. And last week, when I gave this teaching about the radical cost of discipleship, many of you came up to me and said, Pastor Michael, I never want you to preach that again. No, I'm just kidding. You didn't say that. You actually said, Pastor Michael, I really needed to hear that one. I need to be stirred. I want God to shake the bushes of my life. And person after person came up to me, and that's a good sign because you don't mind the Lord, if I can put it this way, getting in your kitchen to say to you, look, this is the most important thing that you can do with your life. Be my disciple. And so who pressed in? The tax gatherers. The hated ones. The sinners, often a word used for those morally impure and even prostitutes. They were coming near. See, Jesus' hard words did not push them away. They came closer. And sometimes when God says something hard to us, We have to decide what we're going to do. Will we press in and say, Lord, that's right? Or will we run away? Well, they were coming near. And they were listening to him. And God gets excited, I believe. We'll see in a moment when people are willing to come near those who maybe would appear lost to others. And both the Pharisees and the scribes, verse 2, they weren't excited. They began to grumble, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them. How horrible!" But the last chapter just told us that he was at a meal with I think he was at a Pharisee's house there. And it's a good thing he eats with sinners, because we're all sinners. They are sinners. They just don't want to admit it. But here they are. Look at what he's... And they've been doing this the whole time. He eats with them. And one pastor said, if ever you wanted someone to be saved, it's a tax collector. You want them to be born again. Amen? Anyway. And so he told them this parable. It will have 3 parts, as I mentioned. We'll look at the first 2, the lost sheep and the lost coin. What man among you, says Jesus, he knows they're grumbling. The word grumble is a word which means a low murmur. Murmur, murmur, grumble, grumble, grumble. I hope that we don't send a message to lost people who don't seem to fit in with our whatever, our paradigm, our demographic. I hope we don't send a message to them that they're not welcome. You see, God has come to seek and to save that which is lost. And I hope we don't look down our noses at other people who are different from us and say, you know what, you don't, and we don't even have to say it sometimes, you don't really fit in. Maybe you shouldn't be here. No, Jesus wants them here. He's come to seek and save the lost. But more than that, we come to church to get equipped, and then we go out of church to do what? Hopefully to seek and save the lost. Your life has a mission behind it. You're an ambassador for Christ, as though He were pleading through you. So we go to work, or we go to the park, or we go to the gym, and we should have eyes looking for lost people. That is a big reason why you are here. And a big reason why the church is here. So a dear brother in the fellowship, he heard a couple of the messages on Mormonism, and 2 Mormon missionaries came to his door. And he said he was upstairs, and he was thinking, should I? Shouldn't I? And then he said, I'm ready. Okay, I'm going down. I'm going to face him. And he opened the door for the Mormon missionaries, and within 5 minutes he said he was in trouble. He's a newer Christian. And so quickly, in a moment of desperation, he dialed the phone, and there was the number of Pastor Michael. And on the speakerphone I went, and I just so happened I answered the phone, and I was traveling at the moment. And he said, Pastor, I need you. Would you talk to these fellows? And so he put me on speaker, and for the next hour and a half, back and forth and up and down we went. The people in the neighborhood were looking up at the mirror. And boy, there was spit and fire and passion. And they accused me of being on a website. He's on one of those Mormon hate websites. No, I wasn't. I was in a car. But I've been preparing. And so I gave them the gospel, and I gave them the truth. And look, the reason this fits is because 2 Mormon missionaries came to this man's door, and God has called us to do what? Seek and save the lost. That is our call. We are the mouthpiece, the hands and the feet of Jesus Christ. We are not to be ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes. And so we're always on call. And so here's the shepherd. And Jesus says, which one of you, verse 4, what man among you, using a popular image of shepherd and sheep, if he has 100 sheep, Luke 15, verse 4, and has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open pasture, and go after the one which is lost until he finds it. William Barclay says, the shepherd in Judea had a hard and dangerous task. Pasture was scarce. The narrow central plateau was only a few miles wide. And then it plunged down to the wild cliffs and terrible devastation of the desert. There was no restraining walls, and the sheep would wander. George Adam Smith wrote of the shepherd, quote, on some high moor across at night, the hyenas howl. When you meet him, the shepherd, he's sleepless, far-sighted, weather-beaten, armed, leaning on his staff and looking out over his scattered sheep. Every one of them are on his heart. And when you see the picture, you understand why the shepherd of Judea sprang to the front in his people's history, why they gave his name to the king and made him the symbol of providence, why Christ took him as a type of self-sacrifice. The shepherd was personally responsible for the sheep. If a sheep was lost to the shepherd, he must at least bring home the fleece to show how it had died. And he had to pay for it unless he could prove it was killed by a predator. There are often sheep that belong to a community of several households. Sometimes there was an individual shepherd that owned the sheep,